Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on the application of data science for governing the environmental impacts of mining practices. I am Ali Ameli, Assistant Professor at the Department of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences. I live and work on Point Grey, Vancouver, on the traditional and unceded lands of Musqueam First Nation. The focus of my research group is on developing scientific knowledge, hydrologic knowledge that's required to better conduct watershed management practices with minimal environmental impacts. So you can find more detail about actually my research group research actually in this website, hydrogeosciencewatershedmanagement.com. In today's presentation, I focus on the part of my group research on understanding the environmental impact of mining practices. And in this topic, we are seeking two objectives. The first one is to develop generalizable knowledge on the environmental impact of mining practices, generalizable to the entire North America, to the entire South America, and also identify lands for performing environmentally low impact mining practices, again at the scale of the entire North America than the entire South America, for example. So the focus of our research is actually continental and global scale, and understanding the environmental impact of mining practices at a large continental or global scale. Before I get into more details about environmental impact, I would like to actually provide some general hydrology information about the type of work that we are doing. So we are all familiar with the concept of watersheds. So watersheds are a piece of lands that actually receive and retain snowmelt water and rainwater after snowfall and after snowmelt and also after rainfall, and transfer this water through different pathways toward streams and rivers or other type of water bodies such as lakes and wetlands. For example, after it rains or after water melts on this piece of land, water may move actually within the shallow soil, within the deep bedrock or over the land, and actually through these pathways, water can move and reach streams and rivers or other water bodies. So the way watersheds the ways that watersheds functions and retain, store, and transfer and release water toward surface water bodies determine how much watershed can filter and damp signals of external forces such as climate and climate change before generating stream flow. So in this context, we can make an analogy with the concept of spring. So we can assign one spring to each type of watershed, because each watershed can have a specific elasticity index that is specific to the watershed, and identify how much a watershed can filter and damp signals of external forces such as rainfall, such as snowmelt, before generating stream flow. So the same as a concept of springs, some of the watersheds, some watersheds are actually significantly damping external forces, and for example, large signals of climate change, large signals of land development, or change in the signals of land development may only very slightly change this sort of watershed or change the stream flow of this sort of watershed. On the other hand, there are watersheds that are very sensitive to external change and can be significantly impacted, or their stream flow can be significantly impacted in in terms of both quantity and quality after applying external change such as climate change and land development. In short, stream flows are not equally sensitive to change in external forces. Some of them are very sensitive, something like this. Some of them are actually not that much sensitive, something like this spring. So in general, in my research group are trying to identify and assign some sort of elasticity index to each like a small or large watershed, and based on that we can kind of understand how much sensitive is the entire watershed to external forces, and also to change in external forces such as climate change and land development. So with this introduction, now I would like to talk about mining activities. And so mining activities, like other type of resource development and land development practices, can change the original and initial state of each catchment and make it worse or make it better, you know, in terms of their elasticity to external change. So mining activities probably in some landscapes may actually change the state of the a given watershed from this elasticity index, or from this type of a spring to this type of a string with much larger elasticity index. So in general, land development, forestry practices, agricultural practices, and for today's presentation, mining activities can change the state of actually elasticity of catchments and how they buffer or damp external change such as climate change, and further land development such as further mining and further forestry and agricultural practices. So the other thing that my research group are now working on is understanding how the initial state of elasticity in the catchment or change due to climate change or land development can be related to multidimensional disturbances. So we have we are exploring some sort of hypothesis that there is very close linkage between the way land development, such as mining activity or forestry or agricultural practices, changing the elasticity of the catchment, can be linked to the degree and extent that those watersheds are vulnerable to multidimensional disturbances, such as stream flow drought, such as a wildfire, such as like a water body, like eutrophication or water quality issues in the water bodies, and such as flood. So multidimensional disturbances may happen after kind of non-scientific land development, or when we are kind of performing mining activity or other type of land development in piece of land that's are kind of crucial part of in terms of hydrology, is crucial part of that watershed, the entire watershed, and can significantly impact the performance of the entire watershed in response to climate change, in response to further like land development and other type of resource development activities. So something that I would like to clarify is that the goal of my research is not to say we should not do mining activity, or we should not do agriculture or forestry practices, but we have to identify a piece of land that we can perform mining activities with a minimal environmental impacts far away from the place that operation and activities are happening. So this figure is very interesting. So we are kind of, in my research, we are looking for a piece of land, for example, in this watershed, that we can conduct a land development, resource management with minimal impact on the river quantity and river water quality and quantity that we can see here. And here I would like to introduce the concept of ecosystem threshold. So generally, natural systems can be assumed that we can assume that natural systems have large damping capability, you know, and have large or have a small elasticity behavior. So they can damp external change largely, you know, without kind of transferring the external change to the output of the watershed, such as a river flow or such as a lake flow in terms of both water quality and quantity. But with the start of land development, natural system may, to some extent, lose this damping function, and they may come. So here, the y-axis is the resistance to disturbance or resistance to multidimensional disturbance. So as a land development starts, the state of catchment actually may move toward more sensitive state in terms of sensitivity or vulnerability to external change, right? So, but still, if we are at this stage, with a little management, watershed management practices, or sometimes with like a natural restoration processes, or with kind of management-based restoration processes, we can kind of return the watershed to its close to its initial condition, somewhere around here, you know. So as long as we are at within this range, within the blue part of ecosystem graph, ecosystem vulnerability graph, we are kind of safe, and we can do further land resource development at the specific places. But as I said, there are specific places within a given watershed that are safe to do these activities without leading to passing this ecosystem threshold. So if in a given watershed, we kind of do mining activity and we pass this ecosystem threshold line, so returning the ecosystem to its initial highly damped condition somewhere around here will be very difficult, either through like a restoring program, or either through restoration program, or either through a natural restoration that may happen. So in responding to this question, where to perform mining activities, my research group are looking for locations across a given watershed that we can do mining activities without passing this threshold, or without moving from highly damp spring to extremely sensitive to external forces spring, something like this spring. So this is how we conceptualize actually elasticity index or elasticity behavior of the entire catchment, and where we can perform mining activities. So the big gap in this sort of research is that there is no generalizable knowledge on this topic, and there is no generalizable knowledge on how we can assign one like elasticity index to each watershed, or how mining activities change the elasticity state of the watershed from this one to this one, or the other way around. And in general, there is no generalizable knowledge on how like elasticity of the watersheds. Sometimes I'm saying catchment, so I mainly mean watershed. So how elasticity of the watersheds can be related to multidimensional environmental disturbances, such as wildfire, drought, flood, or water body, water quality issues, such as eutrophication. And lack of this generalizable knowledge led to the condition that we don't have no generalizable platform to identify environmentally low impact landscape for mining practices. And my research group focusing on filling this gap, how we can develop a generalizable platform to identify environmentally low impact landscape for mining practices. So we do this through the application of data science. So the same as other application of data science, we are learning from well-studied watershed, where we have like a long-term stream flow data, long-term river flow data, We are learning from this sort of watershed, and we are trying to extrapolate this learned knowledge to the region that we don't have stream flow or river flow data. And we are doing that through actually new data science techniques that I will explain in the next slide. So my research group actually collected a large database for the entire North America at more than 2,000 watersheds that you can see the location of the watersheds here. They range from very small watershed to the very large watershed to very large watersheds. And my research team actually collected or kind of compiled data of different types: geophysical data, geological data, hydrological data, climatic data for all these 2,000 watersheds. So for example, this is the like a spatial map of depth to bedrock for these watersheds. So, and with all these like a different type of data set, our goal is to first identify how these 2,000 watersheds store and release water, how they generate a stream flow, and then which is a kind of very novel and state-of-art hydrologic science concept, which we call it in hydrology, we call it hydrologic functions for those who are familiar with the field of hydrology. So we are using this state-of-art hydrologic science concepts to assign elasticity index or one of these spring to each of these 2,000 watershed. And to do this, we also using state-of-art data science causal inference tools. So this is the first place that we are using data science tools to kind of learn how different type of data, different type of characteristics of this for example, this individual watershed, such as its geological data, its geophysical characteristic, its land cover type, and its climatic features, how interactions among all these characteristics can lead to one simple index that tells us how elastic is this catchment or this watershed to the external change or to mining practices. So this is the first place that we are kind of using data science to assign one elasticity index to each catchment. And then once we know the relationship and the interactions among all these different characteristics and the way that they interact together and generate a stream flow, we can extrapolate this knowledge to the entire North America. So this is, and also to the entire North America, and also link this elasticity index to vulnerability. So for example, this figure is a very preliminary results on this sort of extrapolation. So we learned from 2,000 watershed, and then we extrapolated this knowledge to the entire North America. And this map shows a vulnerability to flood, you know. So and here we are going beyond watershed. So for very small pixels, 500-meter pixels, we are determining like a vulnerability to flood. So for example, you can see a highly vulnerable region located in central part of Canada. We are still working on that. This is very preliminary results, and this is only for vulnerability to flood and not multidimensional disturbances. So this figure means that if we conduct some sort of land development, including mining activities, for example, in this like a part of land, we may see large vulnerability at the outlet of the watershed, kilometers away, or large vulnerability to flood kilometers away from this location, or large vulnerability to floods in cities located downstream of actually these places. So these are not ideal places for mining activities. So this is not a final results for vulnerability to flood. This is very preliminary result, and we are still working on that. So, but the figure that I shown was just for vulnerability to flood. So, but our goal is to actually identify and understand where to perform mining activities to minimize the risk of multidimensional disturbances. So, and our goal is to generate the same, similar to this map for the entire North America for multidimensional vulnerability to multidimensional disturbances, because mining activities or forestry practices in a piece of land, for example, located here, may cause and may be involved in wildfire that's happening kilometers away from this point and this location, or a flood or drought or different type of water quality issues. So what's happening here, it's not going to stay here. So it may have a larger impact at a larger watershed scale.